welcome to the Suspense Squad, where authors interview authors. And tonight we have the amazing Lisa Phillips. And she is going to talk about her writing and her latest release that comes out February 23rd, Point of Impact. Yep. You have your book cover.
Yes, I do. It is right here.
Yay.
So fun.
And then could you read us the back cover blurb, please?
I can. An old haunt, a deadly killer at work. 15 years after a serial killer tormented them, Addie and Jacob are living very different lives. As an FBI profiler, Addie is on the edge of burnout. When she returns home, she has to face down every nightmare she's ever had. Is the resurgence of a series of all too familiar deadly crimes the work of a former ally or a mastermind who has been pulling her strings all along? Recluse and artist, Jacob likes his life. It's how he's managed to cope with who he became all those years ago. But he can't avoid the past any longer, not when Addie walks back into town and right back into his life. The past returns in a wave of unexplained crimes, and Addie and Jacob find themselves at the heart of it all, at the place where their lives were torn apart.
Mm-hmm. Sounds wonderful.
You got Ginger there with the whole serial killer thing.
Right?
You perk up there when you mention when I hear serial killer and profiler. I'm on board.
Cool. Very cool.
We have some questions for you, so let's start with Virginia.
Welcome.
Hi.
Glad you're here. I always like to know about a writer's process. Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? How do you put your books together? How do you get started? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big planner, and I think when I first started writing, I looked a lot at structure, and they often give you like overarching beats, like maybe 4 or 5 for the whole book, and I really wanted like a detailed blow by blow. Okay, what happens next? What happens next? Just so I could make sure I was on track, and so I could make sure that the novel worked before I started writing. And so I still do that a lot. I use Susan May Warren's SEQ, the story equation, to make just layered characters. They're complex. They have things to reveal through the book where we kind of get to know them deeper and deeper. And then I usually outline in some form. Occasionally I'll only outline the first few chapters, maybe a quarter of the book, and then I'll start writing. And sometimes I write a few things that are going to happen for each act. So I kind of have an idea, and then sometimes I'll write chapter by chapter outline for the book. So I'm a big planner, and I like to do a lot of revisions before I start writing. So it helps to know if I, went in the right direction, or keep it all together and make it satisfying. So
I believe you don't actually write, you dictate.
I kind of go back and forth depending on the season, because sometimes I have kids at home, or sometimes I have quiet time, or sometimes I have to write, but there's people and dogs around. So I kind of have different methods for depending on what's happening. So for example, quarantine, kids were in the house, and I sat at the end of my yard with the dogs outside with me because I had a puppy and we're all stuck at home. So I actually dictated into the Dragon app on my phone for a whole book. Wow. And then the next book, I was shut up in the bedroom, which is actually where I am now, this desk, and dictated into a headset. And then this last book, this Point of Impact, I actually typed the whole thing because I have my homeschooler next to me most of the time doing the same sprints to get his math done. So it's just kind of like keying it to whatever's happening, whatever season you're in, what works well now. So, yeah.
All right, Patty.
So I'm always interested in what brings out the inspiration for this book. So when I heard of your back cover blurb, I'm like, wow, that's really exciting. So what brought that inspiration?
I think originally it was just the idea of something traumatic that had happened to 2 people in high school, and they were in a relationship when it happened. And then where their lives took them in the aftermath of that. Like they essentially lived two completely different lives. They were captured by a serial killer, and it was a lot of mental and emotional torment rather than it being physical, just so that I could keep it, from going too far kind of into that physical turmoil. But so then in the aftermath of that, they obviously got rescued. And then, she becomes a profiler for the FBI. And when in the beginning of the book, she's actually hitting burnout. And so just how she kind of closed herself off and dove into her work. And then the male main character, he became a photographer, and then he basically tells stories, and they kind of both figure people out in their own way and kind of process people and how they are, and is their kind of way of dealing with it, but they do it in completely different ways. So he tells stories and takes pictures, and he actually put them into a book and is working on another one of those. So yeah, so it's just like the same thing, and then how two different people, how it affected them in two very different ways, and then them coming back together to figure it out. So yes, with a twist.
Always have to have the twist, don't you, Lisa?
Yeah.
All right, Dana.
I'm very excited to have you here with us. Your new book looks incredible. I've already pre-ordered it on my Kindle.
Yeah.
I am very intrigued by your writing. I'm very intrigued by the fact that you do traditional publishing with Love Inspired Suspense, and then you do you're doing like a hybrid model where you've got some of the independently published things and then the small press with Sunrise Publishing. Don't know how you keep it all together, but my question is the whole model of being a hybrid author. What do you see as being like the pros about that, and what are some of the negatives, the cons?
Yeah, I think a big plus was, so I got my first Love Inspired Suspense contract, and then 2 months before that came out, I released my first indie novels. And so what happened was the contract, the advance on the Love Inspired Suspense, that actually funded my first few indie books, the cover, the editing. And so it enabled me to kind of keep afloat the financial side of doing that, which is, for a lot of people, it's a lot of money up front to pay for cover, to pay for editing. And so you can kind of go, you're in the hole until if the book sells and if it's going to make any money. And so just to kind of keep it afloat that way was a big plus for me, because it meant that I wasn't, digging into family funds to, at that point was a hobby that I didn't know for sure if it was going to turn into a career or not, which thankfully it did. And then also I think because I had indie books coming out at a time where I had Love Inspired Suspense on pre-order, it actually gave me visibility on Amazon. I don't think there's a huge amount of crossover between my Love Inspired Suspense and my indie books, at least in the beginning. I think there's a little more crossover now. And so it's just like there's something with the algorithm and the visibility and the way that worked on Amazon that it played in my favor to have, traditional books on pre-order. And then I kind of went one and then back and forth for maybe two or 3 years. So yeah, and just kind of got established, got things up and running, and then kind of doubled down on the indie stuff, and getting a couple of solid series out there really helped me find a footing. So
is it challenging to fit your contracts in? So you're balancing the two with, where they don't want you to publish within a certain time frame. Is that challenging?
I didn't really have that problem with Love Inspired Suspense. I knew I would have that problem with a bigger traditional publisher. And so it's been something I've been kind of on the fence about. Like, it would be nice to have, but the trade-off is a lot more than what Love Inspired Suspense would ask of you. And so they've never made any hard and fast, nothing else within this period, which I know a lot of publishers do. And so, Love Inspired Suspense is really supportive of indie authors. And so they gave me a lot of encouragement in that area.
How long does it take you to write a book usually?
About 3 weeks, depending on the length. Love Inspired Suspense is a little less, and then 3 weeks is like 75,000 words, and then 100,000 words is more like a month. So,
Is that like start to finish?
Mhm.
Like all the editing and everything?
Yeah. Because I outline so much, I really only do a read through and a kind of sprucing up making sure everything's in line. I really only read it through once, and then I send it to. I have a beta reader, and she is fantastic. She'll say that was a spoon, and now it's a fork, and then it's a spoon again, and she'll catch all of those things, and she's amazing. And then I have a line editor that I use also, and she's fast too. So yes, so it's a pretty quick turnaround. And I've had releases where I've been very much like up to the wire on getting it done and getting it in, but I'm working on getting it so that I'm a little bit ahead, and I have a few months of space for life to get crazy, and then it doesn't derail my whole publishing plan. So that's my goal for this year.
All right. And Darlene.
Okay, it's nice to meet you, Lisa.
You too.
Congratulations on your upcoming release.
Thank you.
So I have a question. I want you to tell us something about yourself that we can't find anywhere on the internet.
I was having the hardest time trying to think of something. Okay, so I've got two things. One's personal, one's business, just in case you wanted both sides. Okay, so my personal thing is I have only ever owned one belt. I wear it all the time, and I've been wearing this belt since like high school, and so 25 plus years, the same belt, and I have only ever had one.
Oh, wow.
Which is funny because my 14-year-old's had about 12 belts and always needs a new belt. So I'm like, what's wrong with you?
Oh, I hear you.
So then my business thing is I have a series that's coming up later this year that I'm going to start, and they are more of a thriller, and there's going to be some romance but very slow burn. And then they are she's a former FBI agent who had an encounter with a serial killer that cost her a lot. And then now she's a private investigator. And this past week, we contracted with a design company, and they hired a model, and they did a whole photo shoot. And they have 1,000 pictures that they're going to use to make all the covers, because it's going to be a long running series, and all the marketing. And so they have tons of pictures of, poses, like Charlie's Angels poses. And all kinds of things like walking, running, and spinning around. And so they did this whole big photo shoot with this model, and she just nailed this character. They're amazing. So I can't wait to show everybody when they come out.
So is that indie published, that one, or is
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it will be a long running indie series. So I'm excited for that.
Yay, that sounds
Kind
so
of like the JD Robb kind of
Yeah,
thing where it's a
yeah,
long
yeah.
running with the same character. That'll be
Yeah, like Janet
fascinating.
Ivanovich. Yeah, like Stephanie Plum, and all those ones we hate because you just want her to choose which guy she's going to end up with. Or like Castle. I was thinking of Castle. Like they're about to get married, and then he disappears for 6 months and comes back with amnesia. I was like, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to drive everybody crazy, keeping it all, keep stringing everybody along.